folks, if you saw that list, you know that it's a huge topic, and it's already been with us for many years. So we're going to have to get sharp, be sharp, and we're going to get involved with this thing. There's a long way to go in order to even understand it and then fight it. Now, Senator Hayes is going to now chat with us about his plans and legislation he's going to be introducing in Tallahassee in the next section. Help us welcome now Senator Alan Hayes.
Thank you, Fred, and the rest of you that have put this meeting together. I really appreciate all your efforts. And for those of you that came, I feel like Dan needs to complete his presentation by passing out those little bags that you find in the back of the seat on the aircraft. I mean, doesn't it make you sick to hear what this man has to tell? But the man speaks the truth. So next time, bring us a bag, will you?
Barf bag.
That's right, the barf bag. I was trying to be a little more clean than that, Joe. But anyhow, this is definitely bad news. However, we have some small slivers of good news. One is that thanks to Governor Scott's leadership and the support of the legislature in 2011, we just completely dismantled the Department of Community Affairs, which was the #1 agency that was stymieing growth. And any of you that have any familiarity with local government, whether it be county or city, recognize what an obstructive body DCA was. And DCA is gone. There were a few commendable tasks that they did accomplish, and we just moved those over to the Department of Economic Opportunity. But the Department of Community Affairs doesn't exist as an entity any longer. That doesn't mean our work is complete, though. We also, I have here a long resolution that was adopted by the Republican National Committee January 13th, 2012, and it condemns Agenda 21. And so that is a very good move. I will take a few minutes. Now, I want to explain to you that most of you already know, I'm sure, the legislative process begins when someone like myself or Representative Metz introduces a bill. We get together with the subject matter experts and with the lawyers, and we try to create the fancy language, and we send it to an organization there in the Capitol called bill drafting. The House has one bill drafting department, the Senate has their own bill drafting department, staffed primarily by a group of lawyers, and they put the bill in proper format and in proper language. They then send it back to us and say, okay, do you like this? If you don't, tell us what you don't like, how do you want to change it? And you may go through a half dozen different versions of that bill before you finally hit the button on the computer that says file it. At that point, it gets a bill number, and it begins its journey by the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate assigns that bill to a number of committees. Usually it's at least 3 committees, so the subject matter will be completely vetted, and it then goes on through the process, and every step of the way before one of those committees, it is subject to be amended. And any member of the body can offer an amendment, and it goes through, the scrutiny of public testimony and this sort of thing. So I say all that, something to tell you that I'm going to read to you tonight the basic beginning language of the bill that we plan to file this year. Now there's another little caveat. I'm not the only member of the Senate who can file a bill like this. So there may very well be 3 or 4 or half dozen others. And sometimes, they say frequently, there are 2 things in America you don't want to watch. That's the making of sausage and the making of laws. And so it can be a bit overwhelming when you talk about the whole process. But once you get up there and you learn where the restroom is first, and then you learn where all the different committee rooms are, it is the best system of government devised by man yet. So the beginning language here is an act relating to sustainable development policies, defining the term political subdivision, prohibiting the state or political subdivision from adopting policies that restrict private property rights without due process or that contravene the United States Constitution or the state constitution, prohibiting the state or political subdivision from taking certain actions that implement recommended policies of the United Nations and providing an effective date. Be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Florida, Section 1. As used in this section, the term political subdivision has the same meaning as provided in Statute 11.45 of the Florida statutes. 2, the state or a political subdivision may not adopt or implement any recommendation for a policy of sustainable development which originates in or is traceable to Agenda 21 as adopted by the United Nations in 1992 at its Conference on Environment and Development, or any other international law or ancillary plan of action which deliberately or inadvertently infringes upon or restricts private property rights without due process. That is the real meaning right there. Or contravenes the Constitution of the United States or the state constitution. The state or a political subdivision may not enter into any agreement, expend any sum of money, or receive funds for contracting services, and may not give financial aid to or receive financial aid from any non-governmental or intergovernmental organization, as Dan pointed out to you, some of these NGOs up here, as provided in Agenda 21, which the United Nations has accredited and enlisted to assist in the implementation of its global policies relative to Agenda 21. This act shall take effect upon becoming law, which means when the governor signs it. As I said, that's what we will begin with. Candidly, I don't know that this is the verbatim language that will be present when I hit the file button, but right now it is under, it's already involved in the process. It's processing, yeah. Alabama has already passed a law. There is a law in Kansas and in Arizona also. So other states are out there, and I expect Florida will go. I do know that Senator Gates is in favor of overriding this Agenda 21 nonsense. So we have him in our court as well. So Fred, it's all yours.
Our team is on the job, folks. I have no doubt about it. Thank God we're in a conservative area, we're in a red area, and we got a good team that's got our backs.
Yeah.
And we got to support them now. They're going to be coming to us, and they're going to be asking for help in the future. We're a team. We're partners. And that's how we work together with our elected officials. And now, at the county level, Sean Parks, Commissioner.
All right. Good. Good evening, everybody. Let me just say I'm happy to be here. I think this is a great starting point. I hope we have more discussions like this. It sounds like we are. And we're going to have discussions like this around the county, I hope. Let me just start by saying, sharing a little bit about me and a belief that I have, because I think in relation to this issue, it's important that you know that about me, who is supposed to represent you at county commission level. I'll start off by saying, if I entitled this little writing, if I was writing all this stuff down, I'd call it, I'm a proud conservationist. All right, and I am. But what I see right now, and where we're at with Agenda 21, is that essentially there's two competing views. There's a worldview and there's a biblical view. And so what's important to me tonight is to start off, and I hope we continue to have more discussions, and I'm a part of them, is to tell you where I stand, because at the end of what I'm about to say, I think the starting point for addressing Agenda 21 is asking your elected officials which one of those views they have, the worldview or the biblical view. The biblical view is that God put us on this earth, and it says right in Genesis, and I'll even quote verse 128, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish in the sea and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So that little map I found that was interesting, where it says that man is visitors, right off the bat, not right. We are the stewards. We are called to be stewards, and we should be proud of that. I'm proud to be called, I call myself a steward of the earth. And I think that's important. It does call for us, obviously, not to abuse the environment. We all, as has been said, we all want clean water. Clean water is important, especially in Florida. clean air. We want things to be clean and clean for our kids. That's all very important. It also says in the Bible that the world will come to an end, and we don't know when that's going to be. We're supposed to live as stewards and act as stewards until that time comes. That doesn't get us off the hook, if you will, to be stewards. Oh, the world's going to end here soon, so anything goes. I say all that because what I see then as why we're at with Agenda 21 now and these issues is that the worldview has dominated. And the worldview is that man can solve its own problems. We can't. We have moved away from God, and that's why we're trying to make a bunch of laws. That's why we're trying to pass Agenda 21. People are trying to advocate that because they think that without God, we don't have God, but we can solve our problems through a bunch of lawmaking instead of where it should be, and that's in our hearts. And then there's a danger, and Benjamin Franklin quote, said, "Only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters." And so this is another master, Agenda 21, if it's fully implemented, and the belief behind it, that will be our master. What I'd like to tell you is just give you an update, too, as to what we're doing at the county to address that, to address Agenda 21, and what I think I'm trying to make a big difference here as your county commissioner. I do have one word of caution, and that is we're going to go through this process and be educated. Be careful of sweeping generalizations. Some words, and I'll tell you, freely admit or be candid to you, I come from a very technical background, engineering, civil engineering, land use planning. So, I have been using some of those terms, the same terms that are now red flagged. To me, they don't mean at all, and I hope where you understand where my belief on creation is, clears that up, is that, they mean something completely different to me. They're not used, in a way they've been kind of hijacked, unfortunately. And that's unfortunately the way that we're going. So be careful about those words. To me, some of them mean different things. Traffic calming, it's kind of funny, we were joking. Traffic calming to share borders means probably writing a lot of tickets. So that simple traffic, that's what it used to mean. And that probably works better than, in a lot of cases, than traffic calming devices. But be careful of those generalizations. Our founding fathers did use some of those same words. If you look at the city of Savannah, it was around the 1600s. They used terms like open space, and if you've been to Savannah, they had all the system of little parks, and they believed in the linear use of roads to get the goods from the river, to manufacturing, and right on up into the 1800s when the working conditions in New York and led to the 1906 Standard Zoning and Enabling Act in New York City, because you had toxic uses being done right next door to residential uses, and they used to dump sewage in the streets. That you probably heard those stories. Those were good things that came in development, and those were rules and regulations, and they are things that we need in a sense to protect property rights on the other side. But to me, again, the real danger is that worldview that's dominating, the moral relativism, that putting anything goes. It's all in the beauty of the beholder. It's all up to them, as opposed to what to me is very clearly the biblical view of creation. So what are we doing? Well, let me backtrack for a second. One example as a county commissioner that I've seen of Agenda 21, probably, admittedly, it could go back just a couple years ago. There was an idea in our comprehensive plan, and this is our county's comprehensive plan. It's pretty thick too. At one time, as soon as just 2 years ago, there was a rural protection, a rural overlay. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. And that was a serious violation of property rights. I mean, that had about an 80 to 90% effectively requirement for open space. And if you've got a lot of property, if you're a property, you imagine you own 1,000 acres, it's been in your family for many, many years, and you can only use 80% of it, it's effectively a taking. You're taking somebody's livelihood, a family that's had that for so many years. That was an example, and the landowners rightfully so fought that. It was something that some of you may have heard me talk about when I was campaigning. that we need to get rid of that, and we did get rid of it. That's gone. It's no longer part of the comprehensive plan. So that is a success. What I have proposed with the comprehensive plan is, again, this is a very thick, voluminous document, and it's got many sections to it, some of which are the very same things that have been talked about here. But there's this little tiny part in the very front that says property rights. I'm just thinking, okay, good. Protection of property rights. We have this in our comp plan. It's a good thing. But then you go to it as it currently exists now, and it's literally only one sentence. It just says the county shall comply with all constitutional and statutory requirements governing the protection of property rights when enacting its land development regulations. Very good. Sounds good, one sentence. But what I have proposed as a county commissioner, and I brought this up at a county commission meeting recently, was that we need to go ahead and do our first comprehensive plan amendment and make it very clear up front as to what we stand for and what we mean by planning, and that these words and what our intent will not be hijacked by Agenda 21. So this is what I have proposed, and it's just the beginning. The county commission will address this. We have agreed to address this at a coming date. And I know Commissioner Campion will probably have some comments as well. I think she has some ideas about how to further add to this. But right up front, this is what I have proposed, and I just like to read this. And I think it's probably on the record now. You could probably get a copy. I could certainly send this to you. But in that very first paragraph, we would take out that one-line paragraph. This is protection of property rights. The very front of this document, it's like the preamble. This is the most important statement. It would say, in Lake County, our focus on sustainability is centered on reducing energy costs, strengthening and diversifying our economic base, promoting livable communities, and protecting our natural resources. Our initiatives are not based on any international initiative or suggestion to establish policies that address the environment and development, such as Agenda 21. Our initiatives are based on findings of fact. That's the other problem with this worldview and this very emotional thing that's going on right now. It's all emotion. We need to make good decisions based on real science. So that very much up front is very clear. Our initiatives are based on findings of fact, best available science, and the will of the residents of Lake County. And that needs to be clear. The county recognizes and embraces the fact that the goals, objectives, and policies in this document and corresponding land development regulations shall be consistent with the United States Constitution, the Constitution of the great state of Florida, and the 1986 Growth Management Act. Growth Management Act, I put that in there because I thought it'd be clear that obviously 1986 years, the intent, I believe, of some of the original writers of that Growth Management Act is very different than Agenda 21. I had also added an additional paragraph to this. Unfortunately, it's not on the copy that I printed out, but that our initiatives are also, we very much embrace as a county free market principles, and that should very clearly be up front. When we talk about economic development, it is based on free market principles, and we need to use those exact words. It's a start. I realize we do need to go through this and try to weed out what is a insidious Agenda 21 initiative, and we need to be careful when we write land development regulations. And I think the proposal, and let's see how this unfolds, and hopefully you'll have some input on this, is that we get the citizens involved. If it's a review, if there's some kind of a set-aside group or whatever that reviews this after something has been passed, or before actually that doesn't make sense, before it's passed, that we would have the input and say, no, there's a couple of citizens that are saying, this is a little creepy, or there's something here that bothers me before something is passed. And so we have that input. And so it's almost like a system of checks and balances, if you will, for this comprehensive plan. It's a long document. I do believe in having a plan, I'll say that. I don't think planning is a bad thing. I don't think cooperating occasionally, regionally with our other counties is a bad thing. I think there's a lot of benefit into that. It's just, what do we have that strikes the right balance that does not infringe on property rights and will embrace our heritage, free market principles. That's what's going to be important to me. So, I don't know where I stand on time. I may have gone too long. it.
How do you possibly work out planning of land planning without infringing on property rights? It seems like there's an oxymoron there.
Well, I can, to give you an example of what's going on right now, when some of you may hear about this with what is called a sector plan. And a sector plan did originate with DCA. DCA is gone now, and it's absolutely true. It's very, all DEO, Department of Economic Opportunity, they almost just make recommendations and want you to follow. They want you to have a plan because they believe planning is important. But what we're doing through DEO with the sector plan here in South Lake, as it moves forward, is with volunteers, voluntarily or willing landowners. The landowners are involved in this. It would not have been initiated onto landowners that were unwilling to do it. They're actually paying most of the fee, most of the study, most of the plan. It's not a study. They want to do it. Because there are some benefits to doing it. You can get land use and zoning designations put on land, and it does increase the value. You have a vision that's attractive economically to other businesses around the country, around the world. They want to see that you got a vision. Eventually, you're going to put roads, infrastructure when the time arises, where that's going to go. Proximity to Orlando, the great economic engine of Orlando, the Orlando area. They want to see that. So there's a benefit to putting that plan. They are voluntarily doing this, and that is something I can't stress enough. It's not something as a commissioner that I want to go back like what was done 3 years ago and slap down a rural protection area, which is mandatory. So otherwise, nothing's done. They just get the existing, everything just goes on, and when they're ready, the landowners, they can move forward. So I just I wanted to answer your question by calling out an actual example. So,
thank you, Commissioner Fox.
You're going to come back with questions anyway, right? Okay.
We're going to do Q&A at the end. Now, fellow patriots, what could be more important than the education of our children? The man who was protecting the programs, helping form the programs, our guy on the school board, Tod Howard.
The education part's actually fairly easy. One of the big things that comes from the education side is the International Baccalaureate program. We have not implemented that, and even though we do have requests for it, the board has pretty much steered clear of it. The Common Core is our new set of standards, and that has been adopted through 46 states. The state of Florida did it. The one thing that you'll have to remember when all of this stuff happens is that there's usually a financial penalty, or they can pull your money. The federal government has a lot of power by doing that. And so if you really went into Common Core and the new park, which is going to be the new testing, it's going to be based on international standards, and if you really got down to it, it probably has some Agenda 21 stuff in it. However, the federal government, who pulls those strings, says, here's what you're going to do. The state signs on to it, and then we're stuck with it. And this goes with Race to the Top and a lot of the other things. So it's very difficult from a local school board standpoint to stop some of it. What we do is, when we have new material coming in, Sean's wife actually is one of the folks who reviews that for us. And so by picking good committees and having good folks who understand the issues and who are principled, they help us to make sure that this stuff does not get through. And so any new material that comes into the school is checked by committees. And so that helps us. There's no way I could read every book and every piece of material. I've tried reading Agenda 21. I've been through about 300 pages of it. But when you get to the forestry part of it, it's just, if you don't know what they're talking about, you're just kind of lost on some of it. It's terrible. And so from the school standpoint, our main focus is to make sure that we don't bring any of it from the local standpoint. The stuff that we get from the federal government is difficult, and that's where I'll talk about it, because I've been fighting with Agenda 21 stuff for more than probably 3 years. The problem is I didn't know it was Agenda 21, and it's called Marine Spatial Planning. And for those who don't know, I'm very avid fisherman and sportsman. and I know these guys are too. And one of the things that, as you look at Agenda 21, is you have to make a delineation between, and Sean touched on it, there's environmentalism and there's conservationists, and there's a very big difference. I believe in conservation. Environmentalists do not want you to go there. They want to shut it down. They want to leave it for the birds and the animals to look at, and for the rest of us, we just don't get to see it. And there's something called marine spatial planning, and Dr. Hayes is going to get to deal with this in the coming years. The federal government wants to overlay and take control of all of our estuaries and navigable waterways, and that's throughout Florida and everywhere. The state of Florida has done a great job with our fisheries and with restoring some of these estuaries that we've had problems with. You know, we weren't always good managers of the land. The state of Florida has done a great job of fixing some of that. And the problem that we run into is that the federal government wants to come in and change it, and they're terrible at it. And we've been fighting with marine spatial planning. They want to shut down literally hundreds of thousands of square miles off the East Coast right now. They're already doing it off of the West Coast. You know, this affects our economies, this affects the way we grow up, this affects a lot of the things that we do, and it's very difficult. And so there is what's difficult for the general public is to sit there and decide, is that person conserving or they're an environmentalist? And the easiest way to tell is if they're trying to keep folks out, then that's not something we want. If it's coming from the federal government, it's not something we want. And that is the main place that we really need to make sure that we focus. I don't think anybody here has ever signed on to any Agenda 21 item. If we see it coming, we'd stop it. You know, I talk with Sean quite often. I don't get to talk to Dr. Hayes as much. It's very difficult to get those guys when they're in Tallahassee sometimes. But it is something to make sure that it's not just them. We have to stay on the federal government because that's where a lot of this comes from. Dan was talking about NGOs. How many have ever heard of the Pew Conservation Trust? Or the Pew, what are they? There's 5 trusts. Anyway, the Pew Trust. Yeah. That started out by the founder of Sunoco. Interesting man. He was against the New Deal and went through a lot of the problems in the New Deal and the bureaucracy that's created. He created the Pew Trust to stop the bureaucracy of government. Pew is now probably the primary group that I deal with who is pushing these items. I'm sure some of you saw me on TV not too long ago about the trash cans. I had a full-fledged argument with one of the directors of Pew because they are 100% behind this. Everything that they find, there's an answer from the federal government. I talked to them about the cost associated. Well, we have a bill at the federal government that will help you pay for this. Okay, and so as you go on to a lot of these problems and you bring those up, I talked about our homeless students. Well, we have a program that will feed them at night. That is how they work. They 100% believe in it. They believe that all answers will come from government. And even Pew is a $5 billion organization, 5 trusts. And to go up against those is very, very difficult. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of funding, and when they tell you, you think it makes perfect sense. But they're not telling you the whole part of it. And so those are, you know, what these guys are talking about is absolutely true. And you know, you don't see it as much at my level because by that time, we're just kind of standing there, hey, can you stop? And everybody's like, shh, you're just school board, stop. And so we do try to keep it out from a local standpoint. Most of that stuff does not get in. But from a federal standpoint, you guys have to keep your eyes open and stay on them because it's very difficult to deal with. And like I said, I've been going at it for years and didn't even know what it was. And you'll see it. So, I know Fred. There he is. I don't have much else to add from, like I said, from the school point. But from the conservation side, the marine spatial planning, a lot of the stuff that I deal with as an activist, and I hate to say activist, as a conservationist, and they're bothering these guys and making sure that this stuff doesn't come through. I can give you the insidious side of the government regulations and what they've done with the shutdowns, and that's what they want to do. Is you know they're not interested in our rights at all.
Thank you very much. Folks, we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. And what we're going to ask you to do is please stand up and ask your question so that everybody can hear it and address it to our panel. And again, we're going to go to about roughly 10 minutes, and then we'll have some closing announcements for you. Questions? Yes, Linda, please.
I wanted Sean to mention to the group about the sandscape and what was done in the county commissioner.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. The old sandscape.
Would you like the numbers? I just got them today.
For what? The cost?
For Grassy Lake?
Yeah, okay, well, yes, we'll go to those numbers. Sand skink is a little lizard about this big that was, everybody knows, probably seen the pictures, very cute. Again, I know them well. I mean, I worked in that industry consultant to try to, map them and track them, and same with the gopher tortoises, remove those. We have the Endangered Species Act, very well intent, of course. I mean, it has protected the bald eagle, which, ironically, I don't know if ironically, but interestingly, probably doesn't need to be, well, it needs to be protected, but the numbers have come way back. Really what has happened with sand skinks, especially in Lake County, is by default, by the law, all of Lake County they're assumed to exist. I mean, literally. So when you have a project, you want to build, like, let's just say a Pep Boys, or
What law?
by the
State law or federal law?
by the implementation of the federal law, the Endangered Species Act.
EPA.
Yes. Yes. Well, actually, no, not through EPA, through the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And what they do is you've got to mitigate for them, essentially, and it through their process. And you picture, a bunch of bureaucrats. You got to go to Jacksonville, meet them, and it takes, let's just say, it takes many months. I personally have dealt with one situation where it took 2 years to get a permit. Not only that, but you've got mitigation requirements, and Todd has the numbers of what that has cost school, your tax dollars. Again, we want to protect the species. It's good to be environmentally friendly, but it is way overboard. Literally, if you look at Lake County, the entire area is mapped as existing. So you no longer have the choice of saying, I'm going to go hire somebody like Sean Parks, not in Lake County, of course, but you're going to go out and say, he's going to go out and do mapping and confirm that we're not there. No, we bypass that. They're there, they exist, and you've got to map them at certain times, and then go ahead and pay your mitigation fee. So, no, it's true. There is a process to prove that they don't exist, but it's a very narrow window of time frame that you have to do the surveying. And so there's no certainty in it. It takes a long time value of money for development. Talk about property rights. I mean, that's almost a taking in certain cases. And I know somebody right in Lake County, a very specific example, and I've worked with Congressman Dan Webster. By the way, doesn't Congressman Dan Webster need to get elected? He's a great softball coach too. Different story, but he was very attentive. He was very attentive and has been, written letters with us, and is going to try to address the issue from the Congress, from representative side. We need Senator Marco Rubio's help as well. But in the short term, we're looking at some options right now at the county, and it's been confused. Some people have confused this. We're actually trying to find a way to speed up the mitigation side of it through the county, where we can take the local control over it and then at least speed up the mitigation side. We can't help you with the permitting, but at least you can get mitigation done and with some certainty. But that is a huge takings issue. Thank you for bringing that up. That's another example locally, but it is affecting other counties as well.
Weren't they going to take 44 acres wherever they found a sand skink?
Yeah, yes. The numbers are very. I mean, it basically takes your property. I mean, if you find them on a site, it could take your whole property, or you can, of course, pay money, and it goes to.
Well, I'll just have a hunt for them.
Yeah. And it goes to Washington, of course. But a very specific example, I don't know if I mentioned it, but it did cost this gentleman a contract, because he was going to build a Pep Boys and some other businesses right here in Clermont. And he lost that contract because they could not wait another year, they had to wait a year again to do that one little narrow period of monitoring. And there's a lot of interesting side notes to the story. it's right next to Highway 27, and interestingly enough, DOT didn't find the sand skinks on their property as they were widening the road, but thank you for bringing that up. That's it, and watch that in the county. And we can include that issue specifically. Probably it's very important as we go through our discussions what we're going to do with the sand skink.
Don't miss the sand skink meeting, everybody.
Yes. But tell the numbers.
I'm going to run through these numbers really quick. We had, at Grassy Lake Elementary, we had a sand skink. They found some tracks of a sand skink before we built. And so, tracks. No sand skinks, but tracks. Here's the cost, and I'm going to run through this very fast. Permitting applications, plans, coordination, had to plant 545 scrub oaks, coordination, development through the educational program, monitoring for 4 years, and then monitoring eventually over a 20-year period, another 115 scrub oaks, vegetative nuisance control, you'll get all that. For a grand total of $73,650, that was just to get to the point that, and we had to set that land aside. We couldn't use it. It just sat there. So now, after all of these years, they've decided that there are no skinks because they monitored for the 4 years. We now get the privilege of paying $28,800 in order to get our property back. So $100,000.
That probably would be a better use probably if that were in the school, I would think.
Jerry, before I answer your question, folks, just think about something. We hear that Obama added a couple of 100,000 jobs to the government, and some of you might be saying, what are you hiring these people? What could they possibly be doing? Dan told us where a lot of these yo-yos are going is in these crazy programs, and I don't know who shares this opinion, but does this sound like it's some kind of a religion that they have?
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's called socialism.
It is.
Yeah, he also wrote a book about the religion of liberals.
So this is what we're fighting against, and just keep one thing in mind. Here we are at the Tea Party for the past couple of years. We've been up, we've been out, we've been fighting, we've been engaged. You know what? Prior to that, you know what they've been doing? They've been under the wraps, and they've been engaged, and they've been doing all this stuff to us. The point is, we can't ever go back to sleep again, folks. Never.
I'd just like to ask the panel this, because from what I understand, I've been studying this for a couple of years about Agenda 21, and that is that most of these groups and these regulatory organizations are appointed. They're not elected officials. You guys need us, to support you in terms of what you're doing. You can't fight this individually. I appreciate what you said, Sean. I appreciate Todd and the rest of the panel. I appreciate what you said. But we need to come together and form Agenda 22, which is the end of Agenda 21. We need to come together.
I'm actually going to take a part of that. The leader of NOAA now, which is Jane Levashenko, she was appointed by Obama. She also appoints all of the fishery councils. We have no choice in the fishery councils. NOAA, or the fisheries, are all controlled by the Department of Commerce. These guys do not care one iota about property rights, about the rights of individuals, nothing. And everybody's appointed, and it comes from who we elect for president. That is one of the things that, when I talk about paying attention at the federal government level, Obama already has brought these folks in from Environmental Defense Fund and from Pew and from a lot of these groups. We never see them because they're not here. But the power that they have is tremendous, and you cannot fight it. They do what they want. I have been to many, many meetings, public input and everything else, and they look at you and go, "Thank you very much, and we're going to go this way."
Richard, you got a question?
Well, I guess it's more than a question. It's an awareness issue, because I don't think anybody in this town can help with this right now. But one of the tentacles of Agenda 21 is smart meters. And we've got a real problem right here in Clermont and Kings Ridge, in that our power company, which is Sumter Electric Cooperative, is on the verge of starting to put those meters in, what do we got, 2,200 homes, somewhere around there? And I'm trying to fight it as best I can, and there's a couple other people in our neighborhood, but most people don't even know what Agenda 21 is. And particularly, when they think smart meters, they think, like you said, technology. Who's against technology? But when you start to look at some of the things that those meters do, and can do, it's all part of a big program that the government has for controlling our lives. And we've got to a point where the board of directors of Kings Ridge, in this particular case, has agreed to at least have an open forum in Kings Ridge with whoever we can bring as experts for this subject and the power company and talk the issue out, whether we can do anything about it or not. I called the Tallahassee Office of Public Service Commission today, which controls all our utilities in the state of Florida. And I asked the lady, I said, what is my right as a citizen in terms of meters? And she said, you have none. She is basically, the power company owns the meters, and if they want to take your old meter out and put a new one in, you have nothing to stand on.
Yeah, maybe we should ask Don Santee, who is my neighbor, and he's on the board of directors there. Have you spoken with him at all? He should come to this meeting. He should hear this stuff. He's very conservative with it.
Can I just jump in on that real quick?
I know I've talked to Sean about this.
Yeah, Richard, thank you for bringing that up too. Got a couple of good reminders here. Yes, what I can do is talk to SECO, and it is my intent to do that. I don't know what that's going to amount to, one commissioner doing that. What we could also look at is, and I don't know, admittedly, I don't know too much about it, other than I know Volusia County has written some kind of a resolution, right, opposing it, making it voluntary, I should say. And we need that at the state level, probably. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Senator Hayes wants to address that, but as making that so that it's smart meter is voluntary.
Well,
we want to do it.
It turns out that Progress Energy and Florida Power and Light both have an opt-out program.
Okay.
Because I own another piece of property that has a Florida Power and Light meter on it, and I actually called them, and they allowed me to put my name on the list so that when they come around and change out the meters, my place doesn't have that. But SECO says we don't have a leg to stand on.
We actually discussed that, and I'm going to put him in touch with some friends of mine. It's a 912 group in Seminole County that does focus on smart meter use, and we were in a meeting with Representative Chris Dorworth, who promised to try to introduce some legislation that would require it to be a voluntary, not a mandatory thing.
Folks, we're going to have to wrap this up because Joe and Paul are waiting for us, but you have an announcement that you wanted to make.
Yeah, just real quickly, part of our organization, we send out a weekly newsletter with information. It's not always about Agenda 21, but it's always about property rights and areas where we're fighting and some of the crazy battles. I mean, you wouldn't believe what goes on that government's trying to do to people. But if you'd like to get that, either give me your email tonight, or my email is on the back of this brochure, and you can send it to me, and I'll be glad to do that. Also, I did want to mention real quick, because my board likes me to do this, we are a 501c3, so we live off the donations of people, and if you can become a CPR member, supporting member for as little as $25 a year. I just would say make sure you support your local efforts here before you do anything like that, but if you'd like to, that would be welcome. And finally, I did want to just mention, you've got some real warriors here against Agenda 21 right now, because in the last legislative session, some of you remember there was a septic systems bill that was going to require you to test your septic systems and then replace your septic systems with high-performance systems costing $10,000 to $15,000 each. Senator Hayes was a very outspoken advocate for that, to repeal that bill and replace it with something much more reasonable. And then I was up with Commissioner Parks when he kind of led the effort and was very outspoken on opting out of the state program that required any of that stuff to go on. So good commendations for them, because they're in the battle.
A round of applause for our